Erev Tov. If you remember, we're doing a quick chazara on that which we learned yesterday. What did we learn yesterday? So we learned that it says in a braita, tal and ruchot, which means dew and wind. The rabbis did not obligate to mention it whatsoever. Why not? Because it's always, there's always, it never stops. Okay, and that's what Rabbi Hanina says. So he said, but if you mention it, if you mention it, then it's going to be okay. So says the Gemara, what's the reasoning? Because since it never stops, so the Gemara is going to go into how do we know that tal never stops? So he says, you know how? Very simple. Eliyahu Navi, right? Which is Eliyahu Tishbi, which is Eliyahu Giladi. He comes and he told HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He told HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Listen, he comes and he tells HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Achav, listen, I'm the one now in charge of rain. Yeah, I'm the one in charge, not anybody else. Yeah, I'm going to be the one in charge. Therefore, I'm not going to give you nor rain nor dew. Two things. Why? Because obviously they were doing Averot and so on and so forth. So for, okay, so 3 years it took and there was no rain. 3 years, nada, wallow, 3 years. Okay. After 3 years, the Kodesh Baruch Hu comes and he tells him, go bechavod, yeah, go tell, how do you call it? He says, go tell Achav, you're going to give him rain. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Well, only about rain. What about the tal? So answers the Gemara, that's a proof that what? That the tal never stopped. And since the tal never stopped, that's why he didn't have to tell him anything. Right? That's why. So says the Gemara, 1 second. If it never stops, so what's he making a vow? He's swearing, it's not going to give a tal, it's not going to give dew. So what are you swearing about? Is it still good? No, there's no tal of bracha. So he says, okay, fine. There's no tal of bracha, right? But there was still regular tal, but not tal of bracha. The tal of bracha is what makes things grow. So he says, if that's the tal of bracha, so for when he gives back the rain, why doesn't he give back the tal of bracha? Answers the Gemara, lo nikar. It's not recognizable. We cannot see the difference between good tal and bad tal. Rain and no rain, you know the difference. Good dew and bad dew, you don't know the difference. So because of that, he comes and he says, he didn't actually mention it. We're going to read it inside very quickly. Tana, we learned in a baraita, Gimel Amud Aleph on the bottom. Tana, we learned in a baraita, betal uveruchot, with tal, with dew, and with wind. Lo chivu chachamim laskir. The rabbis did not obligate to mention it, right? In the tefillah. Remember, laskir is to mention, right? Maskirin givurot geshamim. So they didn't obligate you. So therefore, they did not obligate you to mention neither mashiva ruach, which is on the ruach, or morida tal, which is in the tal. Ve'im ba'ale askir. But if you come to be maskir. So if you're going to come to what? To mention it, so then you could have mentioned it. My tama, what's the reasoning? Amar Rabbi Hanina, says Rabbi Hanina, lefi she'en ne'etzarin, because they do not stop. How do you say in Hebrew stop? Say stop.
Yes, sir.
Atzor, stop. So no ne'etzarin, they do not stop. So therefore, since stops, it is atzor. Yeah. So it says do not stop. So since it doesn't stop, it always continues. That's why. So says the Gemara, v'tal menalan de lo miyatza. Tal and tal menalan. From where do we know? Mena, from where? Lan, to us. From where do we know? De lo miyatzar, that it does not stop. Tichtiv, as it says in a pasuk in Melachim Aleph Yud Zayin Aleph. Vayomer Eliyahu Tishbi. Toshevei Gilad. That's why we get Eliyahu Navi and Eliyahu Tishbi. Here it's calling him Tishbi. And he's Eliyahu Giladi because he's Toshvei Gilad. He comes from Gilad. Okay? That's why. That means basically he says, what happens is he comes and he tells to Achav, Chai Hashem Elokei Yisrael asher amati lefanav im hashanim ha'ele talo matar kim lefi devarai. Chai Hashem is a vow, right? For the life of Hashem, the God of Israel. Asher amati lefanav, which I stood in front of him. Im hashanim ha'ele, if these years are going to be talo matar, kim lefi devari, only according to my words. Which means that it won't come down, not rain or not dew, unless it comes through me. And it says immediately afterwards, it says in Perek Yudchet, Pasuk Aleph, this is after 3 years of famine. Lech tera'el Achav, go show yourself to Achav. You're going to give rain on the face of the earth. Now it doesn't say anything about tal. Why doesn't it say anything? My time, what's the reasoning? Mishum, because delo miatzar. Gimel amud bet 3b. Delo miatzar. It's not going to be miatzar. What does that mean? It's not going to be. It's not going to stop. So it says the Gemara, if it didn't stop, so Eliyahu ishtabua lamale. Why did he make a shavua? Ishtabua comes from the lashon of shavua. What is shavua? An oath, a promise. So he says lamale. Why did he make a promise? Meaning, what's the purpose of promising something that he didn't keep? He comes and he promises to Achav, it's not gonna come down due. What are you talking about? What are you swearing about? The dew always came. So answers the Gemara, Haki kamale. This is what it means to tell. Afilu tal de bracha namiloti. No, he didn't just mean stam tal. He says tal of beracha did not come. So then that was correct.
Why afilu?
Yeah. What?
Why afilu tal de bracha?
No, because not only afilu tal shebracha that it's going to be matzmiach tzmachim is not going to come. Which means even though tal, right, was never going to stop, even this one is not going to come. I mean, not only rain is not going to come, even tal of shel bracha is not going to come. So ask the Gemara, fine. So when he returned the rain, he should have also returned the tal bracha at least, right? Because when HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes and tells him, go back to Achav and tell him that you're going to get the rain back, he should have told him also get the tal back as well. Which tal? Tal bracha. Answers the Gemara. Lihadre, hadar is to return. Yeah, lihadre is to retract, to return. So lihadre letal di bracha. At least you should return the tal of bracha. Answers the Gemara. Mishum delo minkera minta. It's not nikar. What does that mean? Right? Minkera is nikar. It's not recognizable. So since it's not recognizable, the distinction between right the tal, which is a bracha, and the regular tal. So therefore, if he would have went and told him, listen, it's going to come back the tal and the matar. So then Achav would have come and said, what are you talking about? Where's it was always tal. What are you talking about? So therefore, in order not to get into a problem, he didn't mention tal. He just says, I'm going to give you back the rain. And then that's it. That's where we got up to until here yesterday. Now, after we just...
No.
So, says now, we're going to do a shakla v'tarya on outside. Now we're going to talk about, what did we just prove? We just said that if a person did not mention tal or ruchot, so nothing happens, correct? Meaning, don't worry about it. Why? Because it always continues. It never stops, okay? And therefore, since it never stops, you don't really have to pray for something. You only have to pray for something that stops, and then you want it to come back. But if something always continues going, right, you don't have to come, and you don't have to pray for it, right? So he comes and he says like this. He says, ruchot. Yeah, we're talking on now wind. Yeah, how do we know that ruchot, the wind, does not stop? So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi comes and he brings a pasuk. The pasuk says that just like the four, right, just like the four winds of the shamayim of the heavens, pirasti etchem nu'um Hashem. I came and I spread you out. So the Gemara asks, what is the pasuk talking about? If it means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is coming and telling to Bnei Yisrael that he spread them throughout the four corners of the world, so why did it say, right? Why does it say ke arba, like the arba? It should have said be arba. Be arba means in, right? With it, meaning he spread them in the four corners of the world, not like the four corners of the world. In the four, meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu spread them. Where did he spread them? In the four corners of the world. What's like the four corners of the world? What's a kaf? So he says it means like this. It means that just like the world cannot exist without ruach, without wind, so too the world cannot exist without the Jews. So this is a proof that the world cannot exist without ruchot. The world cannot exist without any type of a wind. Okay? Because we'll see it right now. Okay, so says the Gemara. Now we're going to read it inside. So the Gemara says inside, ruchot. Now we're talking about wind. Menalan. How do we know? De la miatze. So you see, sometimes menalan is spelled two words, right? Menalan. And sometimes menalan, which was in the previous one, was one word. If you look at the page before, it said menalan in one word. You see it? Betal menalan. Menalan. What does it say? With one word. You see the menalan? One word. Here it's menalan with two words, but it's the same thing. Menalan. From where do we know it? How do we know? We know it. Remember, lan is for us. So how do we know this? Right? Menalan. That it's not going to stop. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the Amar Kab, as it says in a pasuk, ki ke'arba ruchot hashamayim, just like the four winds of the world, right? Or the 4 directions of the world. I'm going to separate, I'm going to spread you out, says Hashem. What is Hashem telling to Bnei Yisrael? What's God telling the people of Israel? So he says, Ilema, if you're going to say, if, lema is to say, right? Ilema, if you're going to say, Hachi kama lehu, this is what Hashem said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael, Debadratinchu be'arba ruche de'alma, that I'm going to spread you out amongst the 4 corners of the world, the 4 directions of the world, because basically he's sending us into exile in all the directions of the world. So Yihachi, if so, ke'arba, like the 4 corners of the world, be'arba me'ba'el. It should be in the 4 corners of the world, which means if I'm going to come and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to spend, right? I'm going to send that there's going to be in all corners of the world. Why did I say in all the corners of the world? Be'arba kanfot haaretz. I'm not going to say like the 4 corners of the world. What's like the 4 corners of the world? What's the like, right? Who's like? What would like? Ke'arba, like the kaf. Should be be'arba kanfot haaretz. In the 4 corners of the world that I spread you out. Ela, but rather he comes to say, no. Ke is like, is this. Haki kaman, this is what it means to say. Keshem, meaning the ke'arba is like keshem. Keshem she'ev shal le'olam belo ruchot. Just like, keshem, just like, efshar, that it's impossible. La'olam, for the world. Belo ruchot, without the winds. Meaning the world cannot survive without winds. Kach, so too, efshar le'olam belo Yisrael. The world cannot live without Yisrael. Which means the pirush of the pasuk is, just like the 4 ruchot hashamayim that they blow in all parts of the world, they sustain the world. So too, I've spread you out in all the 4 portions of the world in order to sustain the world. And therefore, since the world always has winds, so therefore they never stop. That's exactly like Rabbi Chanina. So now we understand why we said at the beginning of the Gemara yesterday that we said, Tana betalu ruchot lo chayvu, you're not obligated to do it. Why? Because they never stop. So if they never stop, what are you going to ask for something? They never stop.
Who says that?
Wait, who's that?
And we do another one.
Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Chanina. Says Rabbi Chanina. Now, what did we just mention? How did we just say? We just said that the rabbis did not Tana, the Braita. This is yesterday's Gemara. The Braita taught us that Tal and Ruchot, they didn't obligate you to say. So mashma, if they didn't obligate you to say, what happens if you didn't say it? So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Chanina, says Rabbi Chanina, he comes and he says, Hilkach. Therefore, right now, remember that this Rabbi Chanina is the halacha that we mentioned above, okay? Because it says, Amar Rabbi Chanina lefi she'en netzarin, right? Because we had a Braita. The Braita just said, Tal and Ruchot, right? They didn't obligate you to mention it. But if you mention it, you mention it. Chazak u'baruch. But you're not obligated to mention it. Says Rabbi Chanina, why? Because they're never stopped. Now, this is the 2 proofs that it didn't stop. We first brought a proof by Tal, and then we brought a proof by Ruchot, that it never stops. Now, says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Chanina, says Rabbi Chanina, Hilkach, therefore, in the summertime, if you did not say Mashiva Ruach, it doesn't matter. If you said Morida Geshem, you have to go back. Why? Because Morida Geshem in the summertime is a klala. It's a curse. So you have to go back. Now, in the winter time, if you didn't say Mashiva Ruach, you don't have to go back. But if you said, and if you didn't say Morida Geshem, you have to go back also. Yeah? One more time. Very simple. Very simple. Summer, and winter. In the summer, if you don't want the rain, so if you said the rain, you put your foot in it, which means that you did a klala. So it's not a good tefillah. It's not a good tefillah, you have to go back. Because you said, Morida Geshem. If you said, yes, right? If you said, Mashiva Ruach, I don't care. Why don't I care if you said Mashiva Ruach? Because you don't have to mention it all. And it's 24/7. It's the entire world. There's always Ruchot. There's always Ruchot. Summer, winter, always Ruchot. So since there's always Ruchot, it doesn't matter. So if you said Mashiva Ruach all year round, I don't care. But the Morida Geshem, no. Because during the winter, if you didn't say Morida Geshem, right, you have to say Morida Geshem in the winter. And if you didn't say Morida Geshem in the winter, you have to go back. But in the summertime, you also have to not mention it. Why not mention it? Because if you mention Morida Geshem in the winter, it's a klala, it's a curse. Wintertime is a curse. So therefore you have to.
It's only mentioning. We said at the beginning that you can mention all year long.
No. 1 minute. Says the Gemara, Amar. No, that's like a Eliezer, but we don't pass like Eliezer. We pass like.
Understand? Like Rabbi Yehoshua.
Very good.
No.
Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Chanina. Says Rabbi Chanina, Hilkach. What is Hilkach?
Therefore,
Chazak Baruch, Bimota Chama, during the days of what's Chama? Summer. Because the Chama is the sun, right? Bimot, during the days of the summer, which is from Pesach until Sukkot. Amar Mashiva Ruach. If you said Mashiva Ruach during Mechayamatim, and Machzidin, you don't have to say again Tefillah. Why? Because since they never stops, so therefore, what's the problem, right? And even the world always needs wind. So since the world always needs wind, if you said Mashiva Ruach all year round, just the words Mashiva Ruach, nobody the Geshem, Mashiva Ruach, it's okay. Because even if you mention it during the summertime, in the summer it also needs wind. So therefore, if you said it, big deal, right? No problem. Amar Mori the Geshem, if you said Mori the Geshem, Machzidin, you have to pray again. Why do you have to pray again? First of all, in Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah brings down, if you finish the Amidah, you have to repeat the entire Amidah. Imagine a person right now, he said Mashiva Ruach Mori the Geshem during summer, repeat the entire Amidah. If he remembered in the middle of the tefillah, if he's still in Mechayametim, you go to the beginning of the Beracha without Mori the Geshem. If he only realized afterwards, again, he goes back to the beginning of the Amidah. So Mamash, this is strict. This is coming up right now. After Pesach. This is halakha l'maaseh. Listen carefully. After Pesach, we're almost by Pesach. After Pesach, halakha l'maaseh. Halakha l'maaseh says, if you come and you made a mistake and you said Mashiva Ruach Umuri Geshem, achalta ota. You know what achalta ota means, right? You ate it. What do you mean you ate it? You have to start again Amidah. Okay. Yeah, you have to start again Amidah.
So where do you see that though?
No, yeah, yes, they are.
Not yet.
Imota Geshamim during the winter. Lo Amar Mashiva Ruach. If you did not say Mashiva Ruach, you don't have to go back again. And Machzidin Oto. Why? Because again, the rabbi is never obligated you to say. Meaning the Mashiva Ruach, the words Mashiva Ruach are never a chova. If a person made a mistake and he said only Mori the Geshem, it's fine, right? Because it's not a chova. Mashiva Ruach. Lo Amar Mori the Geshem. But if you didn't say Mori the Geshem, you also have to go back. You do have to go back. Why? Because now it's winter time. And winter time, you have to go back. So here, if you finish your tefillah, you go back at the beginning. But if you're in the middle of the Mechayametim, you mention it where you are. Okay? And, okay? Fine. Okay? Fine. Right? Machzidin oto. And then there's velo od. We could continue with Hashem tomorrow.